So Dad and they sold the lumber yard and did really quite well on the sale, and that's when they retired. Bought a motorhome and did their
Well, good for them. I mean, they worked hard. They were entrepreneurs. They took risks. Your mom cooked for crews and
logging crews and worked hard. That's the one thing my dad that was his sort of legacy to myself and David and Donna was hard work. Dad worked all the time like they. There was a time where he was running the sawmill, looking after the cattle, working as custodians at the gas plant, driving the school bus. One year, a couple of years, I was actually the assistant principal at Manitoban High School, a junior high in Cochrane. Jim Jenkins was the principal. Jim and I were at the school, and we needed a custodian. So Dad got the idea, well, he and Mom could be the custodians because he comes in every day with a school bus and just bring the kids in, and then he's the school custodian. And they did that for 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Well, Jim and I were
no commuting expenses anyway.
Yeah, no commuting expenses. But it was always long days and hard work. But that's Dad. And of course, when he got to retirement time, and they sold House Brothers Lumberyard, he'd worked hard all his life, and he had no interests or hobbies other than work. So all of a sudden he's retired. Well, what do you do? Well, they bought a big motorhome, and I remember I was principal over at Acme High School at the time, and I remember he called me up and he says, Paul, he says, Mom and I, we bought this motorhome and we're going to go on a trip. I said, well, where are you going, Dad? He says, oh, we're going to go down to Eastern Canada to see all the relatives. He took that motorhome on a ferry onto Newfoundland. He drove it all the way down the east coast of the United States through New York. They were down in Florida. He phoned me at Christmas time, and they were in Florida. And then he went all across the southern United States and to California and Los Angeles, and then drove it up the west coast all the way to Vancouver, and then back through the mountains home. A year.
Wow.
And I remember he phoned me. They were coming home, and so we came over. My wife and I drove over from Acme to be at Jameson Road when they got home with the motorhome. And I remember it coming down the hill and into the yard. And there's he and Mom in the front, and he pulled into the yard and he shut it off and got out, and he threw the keys at me, and he says, that's it, I'm never getting back in that motorhome again. And I said, what, it was too much driving, Dad? And he says, no. He says, I spent a year in that motorhome with your mother. It just wasn't big enough.